You're on.
Good morning and welcome to the House Environment and Energy Committee. This morning, we're going to continue taking testimony on H687, and we are going to be talking about future land use mapping with our regional planning commissioners. Welcome back, Catherine Dimitrick.
Thank you very much for having me, Chair. Okay. First, before I jump into future land use, I just wanted to highlight a question that came up yesterday. I see two of the questioners were not here, so maybe I'll save that.
You can go ahead. We can pass it on.
Okay, sure. So we were thinking about the question that was raised yesterday about the Tier 1B area and the Regional Planning Commission recommendation that upon acceptance of our maps, that would be automatic, and recognize the concerns that were raised about that. And so we wanted to suggest two ideas. The first being that since it would be a jurisdictional trigger, one of the triggers for that jurisdictional change would be a requirement that the municipality has zoning and subdivision regulations. And that's something that's already tracked by the Natural Resources Board because it impacts the commercial jurisdictional trigger for the size 1 acre versus 10 acre. So that is a system that's already in place to track. So that would be easy. And the second piece of that is that we would suggest adding to our description in the statutory language for the 1B areas, a requirement that the area either has water or sewer or the soil capability to do the more community scale systems.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. So just wanted to let you know that we did think about that and wanted to offer a couple of recommendations. And when we provide written testimony, we'll provide some language.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to take a few minutes today. We're talking a lot about future land use. And I just wanted to take a few minutes today to talk about what regional planning commissions currently do and how that might change, just to ground that conversation a little bit more. And what I've had before you and showing you is the current regional plan for Franklin and Grand Isle County, so the Northwest Regional Plan. All regional planning commissions have a proposed land use section of their regional plans and have a map that shows what we envision is the appropriate future development patterns for conservation patterns for those lands. So, for example, currently we've already mapped villages and hamlets and what we consider our regional scale and sub-regional scale growth areas. And our regional plans also all include a description of what those areas mean and what the goals are for those areas. These plans are developed through a collaborative process with our municipalities, with other key stakeholders. We have series of public meetings. We work directly with our communities. We use information from our communities to build these maps, as well as outside information from resource areas and other important features. So it's really a collaborative process that we already do and is already reflected in our regional plans. And now I wanted to show you an example of how that might change under this new scheme that we are recommending. So this is a super rough draft of what a future land use map might look like under these recommendations. And what I wanted to highlight to you is really the scale of the different areas as opposed to the specific lines. So if you look at the red areas, the downtown and village centers, you'll see them scattered about the region in St. Albans City, Fairfax, Richford, etc. Those are the currently designated downtowns and villages that already exist through our state designation program. When you look at this map and see the light pink areas and the purple areas, those are what we're proposing as the planned growth areas. So combined together, if you compare those to Tier 1A and Tier 1B, I want to just talk a minute about what that would mean. So the downtown areas, those in red, plus the pink planned growth areas, those would be the places that we would consider eligible for the Tier 1A exemptions. So if a municipality demonstrates they have all those things in place, then they would be able to achieve the Tier 1A designation. The village centers and the village areas shown in purple are more the areas that might be eligible for the Tier 1B.
Did you provide this to our committee
I
assistant?
will now. Yes.
It would be helpful if we could look at it a little closer up.
And I'll just zoom in on one community to give you an example. So this is the community of Richford, which is a community that has the unfortunate opportunity to hit all of the negative indicators for poverty, income, unemployment, and a host of other social indicators. They currently have a designated village, which is the red area shown on the map. And the pink area that we've shown here is the area that really encompasses their traditional walkable downtown, including neighborhoods, opportunities for redevelopment. And Richford is one of those places that has a ton of opportunities for redevelopment. And we think that something like this process that we're recommending would really help to jumpstart that. So I just wanted to highlight Richford as one example.
Representative Sibilia.
Yeah, Catherine, just a quick question on the Richford.
Oh, sure.
It's something that I worry about. So flood,
Mhm.
so how can we understand that when we're looking at these maps? And by the way, I love seeing these maps. I like to see one for the whole state, kind of.
So I'm glad you asked about that. Because this was a quick mapping exercise, we did not go through the process of like taking out like a river corridor area or a special flood hazard area that should not be in this tier 1B area. We didn't go through that exercise yet, but it is something that I think we will definitely need to take into account because we don't want to encourage development in the very places we're trying to protect from development by changing the regulatory standards.
So as we're doing this mapping, as communities are learning about their towns, like how will that come into this?
So I think one of the things that this process will bring is a great opportunity to have more of those focused discussions locally. So as we're trying to draw these boundaries, really working with the community so they understand more where their river corridors are, where their vulnerable places are, that's going to be a great opportunity to do that at the same time.
So river corridors are critical resource areas?
I think so. They are, yes, and they are regulated. A lot of towns do regulate them at least at a minimum standard.
So is that how we're going to see those showing up on the map?
I think that's an open question. And that's something that's a legislative policy decision as whether those should be shown on a map now or regulated in a different way, which is being discussed by other committees elsewhere in the building.
Feels like it's really important for the mapping now.
Well, I think separate from whether how we might contemplate changing how we regulate development in a river corridor, I think that communities have that data available to them now and they would use it for, I think, what you're talking about, which is identifying areas that are not flood prone for their communities to grow into. So that would be, I imagine, front and center of pretty much every Vermont community right now in how they're going to work with their regional commissions on these future land use maps.
And I think that you raise a really good point. When you look at a community like Richford that has water and sewer, that really wants to grow differently, the designated area, the red area on this map, is right along the river. I mean, it is ripe for flooding and danger. But if you look at the pink area that's been drawn here, that is really great opportunities for redevelopment, for future residential growth, for future, lighter scale commercial that will help support the traditional downtown in a way that's positive and more flood resilient for the future.
So can you just remind us while we're zoomed in what your legend is? The red is the current downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Can you stay zoomed in? It's really helpful for us.
So the red is the current downtown. The pink outside of that would be that area that's eligible for either 1A or 1B, depending on what the community does for their local regulations. And then the kind of rusty orange color is what we've recommended in our future land use study as the transitional zone. So an area that's currently in some strip development pattern that we hope really can transition into a more compact, dense development pattern.
Thank you. Welcome, Representative Sibilia.
So it would just be helpful to me, Catherine, to see this, if you could, I would like to look at this map for Richford and the flood map for Richford. If your office could provide that. And I don't know if that's something for the committee, but I would definitely like to see
Yeah, I
that.
think we can do that. We have a great AmeriCorps person who's made these maps for me, who's excited to use their GIS skills. So that was what I had for you today. Just wanted to present that.
Thank you.
Hi, Charlie Baker, for the record, Executive Director of the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. I am not going to offer you too much more because I feel like we've talked a lot at you in the last couple of weeks. The only thing I think I'll add to what Catherine said is she focused more on the areas in like tier 1. So if I could spend a minute on tier 3, we would really appreciate getting as much direction from the legislature and statute as possible about what should be in tier 3. So, we would like to get started on this work with our communities and the public soon. And I think we have a concern about it taking a long time if we have a process with A&R that takes some, even if it's defined in statute, to take a year or two. We've had some experiences that have taken a lot longer than that. So more direction and statute would be just helpful to us in doing our work. And also, I think for the NRB, after the factors are reviewing our plans and approving our plans, like, are we consistent with statute? So, and we are kind of taking some of the things that are on the table right now and trying to also look at mapping for tier 3 and what that looks like. So we'll, I think, be prepared probably next week to have some more detailed conversation if you're interested in that conversation.
We are. That would be great. Thank you. Can I ask, would you be able to, though, walk us through your definitions of the different categories in the future land use maps right now? I mean, I feel like we may have questions for you and clarifications before we try to work them into our bill.
Yep. Sorry, I'm just flipping to that page from what I sent you.
This is the document you gave us yesterday.
I think, was that shared yesterday? I mentioned it yesterday.
Believe so. It was given to me and shared.
Yeah. So I think from the document that we shared last Friday, and we will also follow up. I know we owe you comments, a map, and we'll also attach this draft statutory language.
It's 34 pages of.
That sounds correct. That's right.
So it is under, I found it under Charlie's name under witnesses members.
Yeah. That's on Cascade, which I put on today's as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the land use areas, downtown village centers. These are really pretty consistent with the current designations for those centers.
Can you tell us what page they're on?
Oh, I'm sorry, page 19. They start on. And this description is actually taken right from the downtown and village center designation language that's currently in statute.
I know you're not a lawyer, but I'm going to ask you to just read it, if you don't mind. Just
Sure. These areas are the vibrant mixed-use centers bringing together community economic activity and civic assets, includes hamlets, villages, new town centers, and larger downtowns seeking benefits under the state designation program. I'm noting we should strike hamlets probably. The downtown village centers are the central business and civic centers within planned growth areas, village areas, or may stand alone. So, and that's just kind of acknowledging we have some village centers that's pretty much all that's there. There isn't a lot of residential development outside that designated village center. There's some very small village centers in the state right now that are, I think we have 250.
a lot. Yeah.
So there's some small ones. There's still probably some potential for more, but that's what that is.
Members have questions. I'm hoping that if you are able to engage on this level right now would be helpful because we're contemplating putting these into our bill. Representative Tori.
A question about hamlets.
Yes,
I'm thinking of one of the towns in my district that has some hamlets and they are, definitely not flood prone and they have historic settlement. And they may have the soils and they may be, I don't know what visioning process is ahead for that community,
Yeah.
but if a hamlet was identified as an area that made sense to be a growth area,
Mhm.
does the fact that it's a hamlet handicap it in any way?
No, I think, and thanks for asking that question. And we actually have another land use category strictly for hamlets. Kind of noting, and the reason for that is noting that they haven't yet asked or done the work to become a designated village center. And so within all of this, it's the notion that a community can move up. So they can move from a hamlet to a village to, put in infrastructure to become a planned growth area and maybe, they wanted to, maybe they could even become a downtown, right? So there is this notion that towns can grow and evolve. I think if you talk with the DHCD staff as they're talking about the designation program and what they're recommending for statutory changes, they're talking a lot about a ladder the community can climb. The more they do, the more benefits they get. There's a same philosophy in here. And it's just also just organically our communities evolved like that, right? Like they started off small, they grew. And then, so there's always the possibility as we go through the iterations of this, that communities could move up or down, if for whatever reason that might happen. Sorry, that's a pretty negative thought.
Members, I found this under, if you go under witness on our webpage and just look up Charlie's name, it's under yesterday's date.
It is live today as
And
well.
Will has just posted it under Charlie's name, so. And we are on page 19.
Yeah. Witness. So item.
Now you can go to today's date, Representative.
Okay. Yeah. So that was item A, downtown village centers. And that's really trying to line up with the designation program for those centers. Item B, and is the more complicated planned growth area. I don't know, I almost feel like saving that for last because we've talked about that the most so far, but I'll kind of review. Planned growth area includes the dense existing settlement and future growth areas with the highest concentrations of population, housing, and employment in each region and town as appropriate. They include a mix of commercial, residential, and civic or cultural sites with active streetscapes supported by land development regulations, public water and or wastewater, and multimodal transportation systems. These areas include historic or new town centers, downtowns, and village centers. These areas should substantially meet the following criteria. And then we have a list of criteria that goes on to the next page, but the bottom of this page, that they have a adopted and approved plan through the, and there's statutory references there, that the areas within walking distance or of municipalities or adjacent municipalities, downtown, village center, new town center, or growth center, that it excludes, and Representative Sibilia, this is to your point, the flood hazard fluvial erosion area, except, and this is we're trying to kind of comport with existing policy, except those areas that have pre-existing development, areas that are suitable for infill. And again, there's a reference to the flood hazard area and river corridor rule from A&R.
So I have a specific example in mind, which is town of Wilmington, which is very densely settled. Drowned multiple times, tropical storm Irene devastated.
Yeah.
So how does that, how are we treating that town in this situation? So it is a designated downtown, does have zoning.
Yeah.
And it's got a river that runs right through the middle.
Right. So I think as we have been thinking about this, we don't want to see development in that hazard zone, right? And so we would do a planned growth area that excludes the hazard area. So that might mean maybe working with the town, maybe there's some opportunity to kind of grow upslope a little bit into a safer area. And that's what we would want to identify because we want to try to encourage that behavior going forward.
And so the existing town,
Yep.
which is an existing designated area,
Yep.
would still remain exempt or no? Or would be able to be exempt or no?
Yeah, if that whole growth area, I think you're in the point of policy debate, I think.
So you look like you don't understand, like.
No, I understand the
what you're
question.
asking. So I
No,
don't.
I understand the question.
Really trying to struggle through this.
I'm
So,
struggling with the response, not the question.
Okay.
Because that is the subject of policy debate in this building right now, right? Is like, how do we treat those areas in the hazard zones? There's a lot of existing development there. Are we, how is that going to be treated? How is it going to be regulated? Is it, so from a planning perspective, we're going to be saying, don't do more stuff there. Like, let's not compound the problems we already have. How that's, legally protected or regulated to improve the situation there is not yet clear to me. We've talked particularly in Senate Natural Resources about the flood hazard river corridor bills S213 that would kind of ramp up the regulatory regime that the state has for those areas. That's one possibility. Does it become jurisdictional for Act 250? And that's part of the regulatory system to review what happens there in a more consistent statewide manner. So I'm sorry, I really do understand the issue and we don't want to compound the problem. I think exactly how we do that as a state is not perfectly clear right now.
I would agree with you. And I would also say that I think these are incredibly emotional conversations in these communities.
Yeah. Well, and it's,
And
yeah.
I think a public engagement
Oh, absolutely.
with all of this is very important. And I'm not seeing,
Yeah, no, public engagement is the foundation of our planning work, to be honest. Yeah, I'm sorry. And these are very emotional conversations in each community, as we're talking about flood damages, and how to evolve in a positive and healthy way for that community is going to be core to the conversation. And that work has not happened, right? I mean, we're not coming here saying all that work is happening. We're looking for statutory language to tell us to go do that work. So that's really what we're talking about here.
well, and just to explain my reaction. So yesterday, Madam Chair, we heard multiple witnesses say, you do this firmly, you have to do it quickly. You have to, really bring the hammer down. And I may agree with all of that. But again, we have to get in front of these conversations with our communities.
Yeah.
And I don't see that on the table right now.
I'm sorry that we're not articulating that. I mean,
It's not to you, Charlie.
No,
I'd
no.
say in general, I am
No.
not seeing that on the table right now. It's not to the RPCs. I apologize.
no,
Corrected.
we're going to own a lot of that.
Yeah.
We work with our communities every day. Sometimes we're helping them, evaluate their flood regulations, and there are really tough conversations. I think we've all been through flood damage situations and, the recovery is hard. And what does the long-term look like? And FEMA doesn't always help us because they're kind of like doing the short-term fix and not the long-term fix.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the conversation we're having in the building is how do we get to a healthier long-term place and still really value those communities and the investments that we have there and, people's roots, for, their families are there. So I totally get the emotion. Those conversations do need to happen. And I don't know if there's a way for us to articulate, because I think we do feel a great sense of responsibility of having those conversations about what should happen in our communities, with our residents. If there's a way that we should articulate, I guess we kind of like know that and we just expect it. Like we're going to have, I don't know how many, we could have 1,000 meetings before we get to our regional plan. I hope I'm exaggerating, but it could be hundreds. And I don't know that I'm exaggerating and saying 100 meetings to really kind of work through these issues with our community. So that we fully expect that is the work in the next 1, 2, 3 years to have these conversations.
Yeah, I mean, you all are the front line on that, and I understand that, and you're doing that now, but we're also talking about historic changes here.
Yeah.
Historic.
Yeah.
And so, we should not all move along as if this is just kind of run of the mill. We need to talk to Vermonters about this, and we need to make sure that you all have a good mandate and good tools to have robust conversations with our communities.
Yeah. And the specifics of how how we become more thoughtful about protecting those areas are really important. Flood regulations can allow, just elevating a building or doing some flood proofing, where there's gray area in between there. This is not a black and white conversation. It's easy to prevent people from going into a floodplain in a new area. Not so easy to do the redevelopment or the reinvestment to make an area more flood resilient. So.
Thank you.
Representative Smith.
Okay. Is this regional plan update been sent to David Snedeker and NVDA?
That's a good question. I just sent this out last Friday. And I've been sending too many emails and I'm a little overloaded, so I'm not sure if I sent it to all.
Would you please send that to him?
Yeah.
If I hadn't already, I value his opinion on things and I'd like to talk with him.
And he's back from vacation, so yeah. And this is really reflecting, this is a statutory version of the study that we did. So he has seen the concepts here.
Okay, good. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Representative Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Charlie, thank you for mentioning going up in the flood areas. There's a community down around my district, Ludlow, which had flooding along the main street that wiped out the mobile home park and the businesses on this end and the hotels and restaurants on this end. But in the middle is a set of condos and they're elevated.
Yeah.
And so they aren't affected by that flooding. So there are ways, and that's where the local process needs to come in to understand those areas. And I think that's what you're trying to allude to.
Yeah, and honestly, in other conversations, particularly around 213, I think we're also having more conversations about, flooding isn't all local. It's not a local issue. It's a watershed issue, right? Watershed moment. But so I think there's going to be a lot of situations where we need to look further upstream. Are there flood mitigation things? Can we get more functioning floodplains upstream of our village centers to really protect them? So there's a lot more conversation that does need to happen in that area. Yeah. Okay, so that was number 3 of the criteria for a planned growth area was a flood hazard. Number 4 is that the plan indicates this area is intended for higher density residential mixed use development. So we want to make sure they've done the planning work within the town. Number 5, the area provides for housing that meets the diversity of social and income groups. That's pretty related to, question.
Representative Logan.
Thanks, Chair. For number 5, would you be open to making that a little bit more prescriptive? Interested in seeing how we could bring over a concept that is something like a priority housing project type of requirement into planned growth.
Yeah, and I do think that's what we mean by a diversity of
Right.
social and income groups.
Right. This leaves it really broad, so that would potentially give municipalities, a very wide range, a way to interpret that locally. But I think I would be more comfortable if there was a little bit more teeth behind
It's
it.
a really good point, and actually in rereading this, I kind of wish that it said also addresses the housing targets, which the Home Act is requiring us to do.
Mhm.
And so, and that's also for a diversity of housing, not just high end or not just low end.
Yeah.
And so there's that language could definitely be strengthened. Thank you.
I am already working on something,
Yeah.
but yeah, very interested in that particular piece.
Us too.
Yeah, I think that's Representative Logan's bringing up a really important point around right now in these neighborhood development areas. For example, we prioritize priority housing projects which are for low and moderate income housing. And how can we make sure that these areas continue to require that, essentially, and that it not just result in market rate housing being built? And maybe you're both talking about two different ends of the same thing when you're talking about the housing inventory, which we have asked yesterday, Representative Sibilia asked that it be broken down by requirements within different income categories, not just we need 6,800 units, but what types of units? And then making sure that we continue to build that housing in these places.
Yeah, and we didn't get specific, I do think that's another policy question that needs to get resolved. I think there's an argument for doing, PHPs ought to be required, for you to get the exemption. Maybe one way to go about it. I mean, and the PHP, I think, requires 20% affordable. So, by definition, it's a mixed income project. I mean, some of them may have more than 20% affordable. But that is interesting. And I think the reason we didn't go there is wanting to just leave the community the flexibility that there may be a mix of things happening. There may be a market, and then there may be a fully affordable project, and then there may be a priority housing project that has a mix. So yeah, we're trying to get to the same result, but not quite sure how much should be mandated. Yeah. Thank you. Number 6 is just that we have, they're doing infrastructure on the transportation, on the streets that meet the complete streets requirements that are already in statute. And then 7 is kind of the anti-sprawl language, and we took this from the existing NDA and smart growth language that's in statute. So this is kind of a condensing of that. So we're talking about it's not characterized by scattered development outside the centers. It doesn't limit transportation options. In other words, it's not just auto-centric. It doesn't fragment farm or forest land, and it's not serviced by municipal infrastructure. And then the last one is, and it's not just strip development along the road. So that was the end of the planned growth area. And again, we're thinking those are the areas that would be eligible for 1A. And if they don't meet the 1A criteria, they would be 1B. Village areas. Yeah, I'm supposed to be elsewhere, but it's okay. The village areas, we talked a little bit about yesterday this. So this is a traditional settlement area or a proposed new settlement area, typically comprised of a cohesive mix of residential, civic, religious, commercial, and mixed-use buildings arranged along Main Street and intersecting streets that are within walking distance for residents who live within and surrounding the core. That definition, again, is taken kind of from current statute about the village areas. And it may, and this is what Catherine was just referencing, this is the key sentence about it. We said may or may not have one of the following. I think we're kind of evolving to no, you need to have some way to deal with wastewater, and you need to have some level of development regulations. Again, I think we were erring on trying to be more inclusive so that more towns could participate in the 1B option, which is the kind of conversation that was happening at the NRB table, study table there. But if it needs to move a little bit, understand. And they provide some opportunity for infill development or new development areas where the village can grow and be flood resilient. These areas include existing village center and some of the designations, but this area is larger than the village center. So again, the village centers focus on the commercial core. The village area would bring in the residential that are adjacent to that core. Catherine just mentioned this, and now we're kind of moving out of tier 1 to tier 2 as you think about the NRB recommendations. The transition infill areas. So do you want me to read this or just talk more general? You want me to read? Okay, thank you. So this area includes existing or planned commercial, office, mixed-use development, or residential uses, either adjacent to a planned growth area or village area, or a new standalone transition area that is served by or planned for water and wastewater. The intent of this land use category is to transform these areas into higher density mixed use settlements or residential neighborhoods through infill and redevelopment or new development. New commercial strip auto-oriented development is not allowed as to prevent negatively impacting the economic vitality of the commercial areas in the adjacent or nearby planned growth or village area. This area could also include adjacent greenfields, safer from flooding and planned for future growth. And in this area, we're really trying to say they haven't necessarily done the bylaw work yet, but we're identifying there's an opportunity in this area for them to evolve and get denser in this part of town. So they have some infrastructure, but they really haven't done the bylaw work. Item E.
Can you say they haven't done the bylaw work? These are towns that have bylaws, so what does that mean?
Not all our villages have bylaws.
I guess when I think about the transition infill area, I think of communities that are served by water and sewer.
Yeah, there's a lot of these areas that would not be. So this is our more rural villages that may not have the infrastructure. And they may have bylaws, but it may be very old bylaws.
Adjacent to a planned growth area.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely the planned growth area. I bet you're probably right. The village area ones, so where we have strip development, leading into a village, they may or may not have bylaws. They may or may not have the infrastructure.
Okay, so this is a kind of a two-pronged land use category where it could be a place where historic zoning may have allowed for a more linear auto focus. And they're trying to kind of correct it back to a more walkable, accessible area, but it also could be a place that communities are hoping to grow into.
Right.
Okay, I thought that was in more of the previous two categories also.
If they've done the bylaw work, it probably would be in the upper two categories. If they haven't really done, I'm going to use the word good, and I'm to mean a lot of stuff. If they haven't done updated bylaws that kind of like are trying to do a mix of uses and make it more walkable. So like they have bylaws that still are encouraging strip development or larger lot development. This is where we would kind of say, hey, this area could look different if you updated your bylaws, but we're kind of flagging it because it's an opportunity that maybe the town's been talking about growing into. And it's kind of, I think we mean kind of literally, we're probably in a transitional conversation with the town. Or the town is in a conversation with themselves about how do they want to treat that, but they haven't made the final decisions yet. If they did make the decisions, I agree with you, then it would move up. And we were just trying to, I think, capture, we're going to have some towns that haven't done the work yet, but there's an opportunity here.
Thank you. Representative Lovey.
Thanks, Chair. Is it inappropriate to ask an example? I'm having a hard time envisioning like a specific community that fits in the.
Thank you. Gives me an opportunity.
That poster child is in South Burlington?
I was going to go to Shelburne, but
Maybe it is Shelburne.
actually, let's talk about both of them.
Yeah.
Because, so if you're familiar at all with Shelburne Road, Route 7, right, coming south from between Burlington and the village of Shelburne, right, which I'm sure 50 years ago was a beautiful farm field and has been, car dealerships and, gas stations and fast food restaurants, right? In South Burlington, I would probably argue that they might be part of a planned growth area. They've updated their zoning. They have the infrastructure. They're trying to, you'll see there's been change there. Apartment buildings are coming closer to the street. There's mixed use projects. So they're probably a good example of community that did the work and can move up. Shelburne has tried to do the work a little bit, but their zoning right now between Shelburne Village and South Burlington probably is in the process and needs to be updated. So they probably would be a transition area right now. And if they did get all their zoning updated, they do have water and sewer. They're on a transit route. And so they could probably get there, but right now we would probably say your transition right now, until you've done the work, then you move up. Is that helpful? Sorry, Shelburne and South Burlington. Well, I guess not sorry to South Burlington. Sorry, Shelburne. Hopefully that doesn't cost me later. Please pay your dues. Section E, so now we start to get a little, or these are still kind of in tier 2, resource-based recreation. A number of regions kind of call out as special areas, the ski areas. And this kind of started as that. And then as we were talking about it, we were like, there could be some other areas, maybe Space and Harbor, thank you. We've definitely been too many meetings together. But Basin Harbor is probably another one of these where, they've got their wastewater and they've got a bunch of units and right there, right? So that's what that is. But they do have infrastructure, jobs, housing to support those recreational activities. Item F, enterprise. So these are locations of high economic activity and employment, which are not adjacent to planned growth areas. They include industrial parks, areas of natural resource extraction, gravel pits like that, and other commercial uses which involve larger land areas. Enterprise areas typically have ready access to water supply, sewage disposal, electricity, and freight transportation networks. And this was just acknowledging, as we looked at the regional plans around the state, there were some of these industrial parks and things that are not really tied closely into a village or center. So acknowledging this.
So these are all in proposed to be in tier 2.
Yeah.
And
So we were thinking about it.
experience for development in an industrial park today versus if we pass this and it's in a tier 2 would be what? What is the change?
We didn't, when we were writing this, we didn't think there was going to be much change in tier 2, but I don't, probably Sabina can answer that better than I can.
That's great. It's back, that'd be great if she could.
Yeah, and I think important to note that we do have a lot of industrial and business parks that are kind of part of the community fabric. Those would be probably in the planned growth area, like they're part of that tier 1 area. So this is really the standalone places that are just not connected to the fabric of the community. So in item G, we get to that hamlet places, the small historic clusters of homes and perhaps a school, church, store, or other public building not planned for significant growth without public water or wastewater, mostly focused along 1 or 2 roads. And, as we were talking about, some of them were so small, some of the RPCs were saying, well, we might just note it as a point because the point is probably going to be bigger than the geography when we, particularly for the kingdom, they were kind of like, that's how they're kind of, I expect they will probably treat these places. And others of us may do the same. Any questions on that? And again, this was kind of just wanting to acknowledge those kind of little centers of the community that, again, could grow, could evolve into and move up the scale into a village. And then the last 3, we really get into, we started off with kind of the word rural in all of these very purposefully. But we decided to break it out into 3 categories of rural. Some of the regions are breaking it out. Some of us just have a blanket rural zone now. The rural general is, we're trying to promote the traditional working landscape and natural area features, but it does allow for low density residential and sometimes limited commercial that is compatible with productive lands and natural areas. These could also include an area that a municipality is planning to make more rural than it is currently. Remember some conversation about that, like if a community wants to actually kind of de-densify an area, how would they indicate that and say, oh, you want to be rural? We're talking about the future here, not necessarily what is, but what is your plan for the area? Item A is getting more into those productive lands, the agriculture, forestry, the blocks of forest and farmland, the sustained resource industries provide critical wildlife habitat, movement and outdoor recreation, flood storage, aquifer recharge, scenic beauty, and contribute to economic well-being and quality of life. Development in these areas should be carefully managed to promote the working landscape and rural economy and address regional goals while protecting agriculture and forest resource value. And there's just a note, in 2016, I think you passed Act 171, which was about having us do more forestry planning in our town and regional plans. So this is just kind of a connection. This is kind of the area where some of that mapping would probably live in that area. And then, and there could definitely, there's some overlapping here. We wanted to have a rural conservation area that is intended to be conserved, often with regulations or state or nonprofit purchase of property rights, limiting development, fragmentation, and diversion in order to maintain ecological health and scenic beauty. These lands have significant ecological value and require special protection due to their uniqueness, fragility, or ecological importance. They may include protected lands, areas with specific features like steep slopes or endangered species, wetlands, flood hazard areas, and shoreline protection areas. And you'll see note in highlight that was a start to a list, but we're not sure that really is the list, but we really would like to get some clear direction here. And these areas are intended to remain largely undeveloped for the benefit of future generations. Some portion of managed forest land will likely fall into this category. So kind of acknowledging, there's a little, I don't know, just we'll need to get some clarity about, what goes into the forest versus the conservation. And it's also intended to help meet the requirements of Act 71. And I think 10 VSA 89, maybe the 30 by 30, 50 by 50 section of statute that you passed pretty recently. So, we're kind of anticipating that work may also inform this.
Also be a good, sorry,
Representative Bongo.
also be a good place to plug in reference to law conservation. Consistency.
Yeah, and that may be the direction they've got to give here.
These are the tier 3.
Tier 3, thank you. I was going to mention that. Yeah, when we've been thinking about this, we're like, okay, if this is where the tier 3, extra jurisdiction would come in through Act 250. Yes.
So, just a flag I want to plant here is I'm looking at the language on this, and thinking about, people who have this land now. The language, so for instance, the language in I is helpful. It's kind of descriptive about what the land is and why it's important. So in J, include areas intended to be conserved. So that, that language doesn't quite sit right with me. It feels not respectful of the people that may be on that land, and not as helpful as the language before in terms of describing its importance. So I don't have any suggestions. I just want to note that I'm seeing that and thinking about that.
Yeah. No, I think that is a really good thing to think about. I think we were.
Intent, like it says intended to be conserved, so it may not be the property owner's intent to have that conserved, even though, so we have to help kind of explain the why here.
Yeah, and I think our thinking about this was trying to be supportive of wherever the 30 by 30, 50 by 50 conversation goes. If we know there's going to be some mapping or some criteria that comes out of that, we're trying to line up with that. So we are having clear conversations with property owners.
So I have a suggestion actually,
Yeah.
which may not work, but something instead like important to be considered for conservation or something like that, which feels more helpful to a property owner as opposed to, I don't intend for that.
Yeah.
So.
And obviously when we use the word intent in statute, that's the state's, the legislature's intent, right? That's the end of the future land use.
Yeah, Charlie, thank you for taking the time to walk us through that and help us understand. We'll probably have further questions as we work it in, but
Sorry to take so much time.
no, we had time for you, and that was the intention of this morning. Members, we're take a quick break until 10 and then start up again with our next scheduled witnesses.